Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a truly immersive, cinematic journey to the very edge of human existence. For millennia, the exact moment we cross over has been this profound mystery, completely guarded by philosophy and religion. But right now, modern neuroscience is finally peering through the keyhole. We're going to dive into the hard data, some unprecedented brain scans, and the biological realities of the transition between life and death. So let's step up to the threshold.
Steve Jobs, arguably one of the most brilliant tech visionaries of our time, looked past his family in his final moments and simply said, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." And Thomas Edison, a total titan of invention, he famously remarked, "It is very beautiful over there." It really makes you wonder, right? What exactly were they seeing? What were they experiencing? To figure that out, we have to move past the beautiful poetry of those final words and dive headfirst into the hard, measurable science of how the human body actually powers down.
So Section 1, the final hours. Because before we can look at the hidden fireworks in the brain, we first need to understand the observable physical decline.
Okay, let's walk through this clinical timeline documented by the NHS. As the end approaches, the body enters this highly orchestrated sequence. Step 1 is a profound drowsiness. The patient just sleeps more, kind of slipping in and out of consciousness as they lose the desire to eat or drink. Then, step 2 introduces something called Cheyne-Stokes breathing. This is a very specific pattern where shallow breaths alternate with deep, rapid ones, and it's often followed by a pause. Finally, step 3. Because circulation changes and the body prioritizes blood for the core organs, the hands and feet grow distinctly cold. It's a somber, very factual baseline of how the body prepares to stop. But here's the thing. The assumption that an unresponsive body means a totally disconnected mind, well, that is where the science takes a thrilling turn. That brings us to Section 2, the lingering senses. And it's all about the surprising ways the brain stays tethered to the outside world, even as the physical body shuts down.
It really all comes down to this one profound question. Are they still listening? Think about it. When you sit beside an unresponsive loved one, holding their hand in those final hours, is your voice actually reaching them? For years, anecdotal evidence suggested hearing was the very last sense to go, but we just couldn't prove it. Until now.
In 2020, clinical proof finally emerged. Researchers at the University of British Columbia ran this incredible study, which was detailed in inverse. They monitored 13 terminal hospice patients using EEG brain scans. They basically played auditory tones to conscious, healthy control subjects and then to unresponsive, dying patients. And astonishingly, the dying brains showed electrical activity that registered the sounds in almost the exact same way as a healthy brain. So even without any physical response, their auditory systems were still functioning. The big takeaway here is actually profoundly comforting. Continuing to talk to a passing loved one truly matters, because they are, quite literally, still listening. Now for Section 3, a spark in the dark. Let's shift our focus inward to the microscopic, hidden electrical activity that happens precisely when the heart stops. This next medical breakthrough, it happened entirely by accident. In 2022, doctors were running a continuous EEG on an 87-year-old patient to monitor his epilepsy seizures. But unexpectedly, the patient suffered a fatal heart attack right there during the scan. Because he had a strict do not resuscitate order, the doctors allowed nature to take its course, and the EEG machine just kept on recording. So for the very first time in human history, medical science captured the exact real-time brain activity of a dying human being. To understand what they saw, we need to talk about gamma oscillations. These are the fastest, highest frequency brainwaves we produce. You only generate these when you are intensely concentrating, deeply dreaming, retrieving complex memories, or engaging in high-level conscious perception. Logically, you'd expect a dying oxygen-starved brain to just flatline, right? But that is absolutely not what happened. Let's break down the chronological timeline of that scan, which was documented in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience. Out of a 900-second continuous recording, the researchers zoomed in on a critical 1-minute window. Exactly 30 seconds before the heart stopped, gamma waves began to massively surge in the brain's memory centers. But here is the absolute miracle. For 30 seconds after the heart stopped pumping blood, those high-frequency oscillations just continued. The brain wasn't shutting down like a flipped light switch. It was firing up, potentially playing a highly organized final movie of the patient's entire life. Moving into Section 4, the life review phenomenon. We're transitioning now from the raw electrical data to the deeply personal, subjective experiences of dying. First off, we need to clear up a bit of a myth. You've probably seen that viral internet claim floating around, the one saying everyone gets exactly a guaranteed 7 minutes of brain activity playing back memories like a movie. Well, lead stories fact-check this, and the clinical reality is far more complex. When the heart stops, blood flow stops, and without blood, the brain generally shuts down very quickly. It's highly unlikely that organized, conscious thought persists for a uniform 7 minutes for everyone. However, verified by experts like Dr. Sam Parnia, a significant subset of people really do experience something extraordinary in whatever brief window they have. And the numbers are shocking. 40%. According to a landmark study by Dr. Parnia published in the journal Resuscitation, an astonishing 40% of patients who received CPR and had brain monitoring showed brain activity consistent with consciousness. And this is even when they were physically entirely unresponsive. Let's put that resuscitation journal data into perspective. Out of 567 cardiac arrest patients in that study, the vast majority, roughly 90%, did not survive. Of the small fraction that actually did survive, most had no memory of the event whatsoever. But a highly significant subset, about 2% of the total, survived with what clinical researchers are now formally calling recalled experiences of death, or RED.
So what exactly are they experiencing? The qualitative data here is wild because it's incredibly consistent across entirely different cultures and backgrounds. Survivors routinely report feeling a separation from their physical body. They describe this purposeful, panoramic playback of their entire lives. And they're not just passively watching it, they're actively reevaluating their actions, morally and ethically. Overwhelmingly, they report an intense feeling of peace, like they're returning to a comforting home. This isn't just a random hallucination. Hallucinations are chaotic. This experience is hyperlucid, organized, and deeply immersive.
Which leads perfectly into Section 5, Biology of the Last Breath. What are the scientific theories attempting to explain why this explosion of memory actually happens? The best way to visualize this is through the emergency generator analogy. Think of the dying brain like a massive house losing power during a storm. When the heart stops, the main power goes out. But instead of just going totally dark, the brain taps into an emergency generator, drawing on massive final reserves of cellular energy called ATP. This sudden energy surge specifically activates the temporoparietal occipital zone, the TPO zone, which is the area responsible for dreams and memory.
Dr. Parnia's team also offers another fascinating biological explanation, the disinhibition theory. Normally, our brains have these built-in braking systems. They filter out excess information just so we can function in our daily lives without being overwhelmed. But as oxygen starvation sets in, those brakes fail. It's like cutting the brake lines on a car. This lack of oxygen removes the inhibition, suddenly granting the dying mind complete, unfiltered access to the entire vault of consciousness. Every suppressed memory, thought, and emotion just rushes forward all at once. And of course, we also have to look at the chemistry, specifically the DMT hypothesis. Dimethyltryptamine is a naturally occurring psychedelic compound. Some researchers propose that during the extreme physical stress of death, the brain's pineal gland releases a massive surge of endogenous DMT. This chemical flood could perfectly explain the intense feelings of transcendence, that sense of timelessness, the bright tunnels of light, and the profound peace that so many near-death survivors universally report.
And finally, Section 6, Redefining the End. How do all these data points force us to rethink human mortality?
Dr. Ajmal Zamar, the neurosurgeon involved in that miraculous 2022 EEG scan, perfectly summarized where science is at right now. He said these findings challenge our understanding of when exactly life ends. Historically, we thought death was a very specific moment. A heartbeat stops, a flatline appears, and that's it. But modern science is proving that death is not a light switch flipping off. It's a highly complex, beautifully orchestrated process that extends minutes, perhaps even longer, past what we used to consider the end.
And that leaves us with a massive, lingering question to wrap up this explainer. If the mind doesn't just abruptly vanish into the dark, but instead draws on its final emergency reserves to retreat into a vivid, panoramic reverie of our most deeply held memories, is death really a final event? Or is it simply a profound, deeply biological transition? The science strongly suggests that even as our eyes close for the last time, our minds might just be treating us to one last brilliant show. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me today.